Hey everyone, how are you all doing today? My name is Jordan McCracken-Foster, and I'm a teaching artist here at Art Prof. And I'm here today with Clara Lieu, and we are going to go through an art school portfolio. So this is going to be really interesting, guys. And for those of you who are brand new to Art Prof, definitely check out our website at artprof.org, where we have lots of free resources like tutorials and critiques, and you can continue to make your artistic weakness your strength and grow as an artist. So Clara, why don't we look at the work for today?
Yeah, so today we are looking at Julie Chung's art school portfolio, and Julie is preparing a portfolio for application. And so she sent us an artist statement where she talks about how she wants to learn how to create more polished pieces that express a greater amount of emotion. And she feels right now that a lot of her pieces don't really have a consistent theme, with the exception of a couple pieces in the middle that have this theme of exposing and unveiling what we're blinded to. And so it would be really great, I think, for Julie to see how you guys interpret her pieces. And are you seeing emotions? Do you feel they can be more polished? So we can definitely talk about that. So let's do this. What we usually do for the portfolio critiques is we talk about the entire portfolio in general. We give some basic strategies. So we're looking at a slide here. This is all the artworks by Julie, but we are going to go through and critique each individual piece. And Julie's Instagram, it's in the video description below. So if you guys want to give her a follow, I'm sure she would love that. So Jordan, what is your first impression of Julie's entire portfolio?
So where I think Julie excels is in the ideas. I think that there is a lot of interesting concepts here, and I think that they are the beginnings of something that could turn to artwork that is really asking some very deep questions. And I also think the experimentation in terms of the mark making and the styles is also really, really great. So we have some heavily textured artworks. We have some that are paintings. We have some that are a mixture of the two, like the one on the top left. And so we're seeing a bunch of different things here. And I think that's where her strengths particularly lie.
I mean, I definitely see a lot of narratives that definitely pique my curiosity. I think a lot of them are somewhat ambiguous. And so there's a little bit of a guessing game there, which I think is great, because sometimes you have artworks, they almost explain themselves too well. And I feel like in Julie's, there's a lot of images here that are very mysterious. Now, that said, though, there's a lot of things that could be improved for sure. And one of them is, I feel, looking at the imagery, that there's too much emphasis on the human face. And I would love to see a broader range of subjects represented, because the human face is great, but there's a lot of other subjects out there that are going to make your figurative work more engaging. So in general, Jordan, what's something you think Julie could work on?
Well, looking at all the pieces together, I think the biggest thing is the color palette is the same or very similar all throughout. There's this peach type of color, you have this pale red, and every once in a while you'll have a grayish blue color every once in a while. And so I would really like for Julie to kind of step out of that boundary and try some new things, try some cerulean blue, try some turquoise, and really push the color to bring out the emotion that's in these pieces, because I think that's where a lot of the meaning is. It's the emotion. There's something there that is there's a story there she's really trying to convey, and I think that'll really help push it further.
I mean, one thing, Julie, that I think you're doing really well is the contrast is gorgeous in a lot of these pieces. I think there's a beautiful range of grays. You're clearly not afraid to do dark darks, which a lot of people are very intimidated by. So I feel very much like, Julie, you've got a very solid grip on contrast. We have a question from Neil, who is saying art school portfolios don't need to be cohesive, right? Absolutely. Art school portfolios for an undergraduate application can be all over the place. So why is that, Jordan? Why did they want to see a range of artworks?
Well, if you have all these applications coming in, what I imagine a lot of teachers, a lot of committees want to see is someone who's willing to experiment and try new things. If you don't have to be a master at all the things that you try out, you could do drawing, you could do sculpture, you could do painting, but as long as you're willing to give that extra push to something you may not be familiar in, that's always something that's really, really great. And I think that's sometimes even better than someone who's a master at one thing, but only has that one thing in their portfolio.
And also, especially if you're doing an undergraduate degree, you're just getting started. You're at the beginning of your career. And I think one thing that I see a lot is a lot of high school students will say to me, oh, I'm so frustrated because I don't have a style yet. I'm like, are you kidding? You're 17. Like, you don't need to have a style right now. You need to be getting yourself out there and seeing what's available to you. Because when I was 16, I knew about 1% of what was available. And a lot of this is just, like you said, trying all these different techniques. All right, so let's look at this first oil painting by Julie. The title of it is Join Me. Jordan, what's your first impression?
I'm curious to know what join me means. I'm a little confused as to what the title's really about. But I do get this sense of emptiness, this void. It feels like I feel isolated as I'm looking at this, like, or if that's the emotion that's trying to be conveyed. And so, yeah, the isolation, mystery, all those things are coming through for me.
I mean, it definitely is very frightening and haunting looking. I think that quality, that expressive quality, is definitely coming across. And actually, some of my favorite parts of this painting are the lower right-hand corner where Julie's brushwork gets very bold and you're showing your brushwork more. And I almost wish that there was more of that, because the hand, to me, it feels a little bit fussy. And I wish that the hand had the same freshness of the brushwork that I see in the lower right-hand corner. Now, one thing that took me a while to notice, I don't know if you're picking up on it, Jordan, but do you see that there's a little pill that is touching the finger?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was like a cigarette butt or what it was, but now that you say it's a pill, I'm zooming all in. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, what do you think that is?
I mean, I imagine based on now the context of the title, Join Me, maybe it has something to do with, take this pill with me. Maybe it has something to do, something to do with that. I'm not trying to put words in Julie's mouth, but that's the impression that I'm getting. It has something to do with partaking in drugs or pills or whatever.
Yeah, so Julie actually did send us a very comprehensive statement about every single artwork. We're not going to go over it because it would take too long, but I think what's very helpful, even if you have like a really particular thing you're trying to say, is to hear from people who don't know what you're trying to say and what is their interpretation. And so we have a couple comments here. Seven Angelica saying, is that a pill that the figure is popping? And Neil is saying, is that a pill next to her finger? This is giving me so much drug abuse vibes. And Seven Angelic says, or prescription for depression or some other disorder. And randomness of fandoms has said, could be peer pressure. All right, so it sounds like a lot of people think it's about drug abuse. I mean, if the title is Join Me, it seems like it could be peer pressure to take drugs, but it's a little bit generic. Do you wish, Jordan, that it got more specific? Or do you like the mystery, the ambiguity?
I think, I'm kind of torn because for me, the mystery comes from the space that this figure is in, not so much that the face is missing. I feel like the face missing can be seen as something very cliche and very easy to do as a way to just say this means everybody. It could be anyone. It could be you. It could be your neighbor. But I feel like when you put a face on it, it actually makes it even more emotional because you can put that expression on the character's face and show like a false sense of joy or something like that. And because it gets so much more complex when you do things like that.
Yeah, I think that I don't read it as an individual. It seems like a figure that represents something. So to me, the figure could be a figurative version of temptation, of peer pressure to take the drugs. And it seems like we have some other theories here. Cerulean is saying, I see it as depression. Neil says, I'm thinking about suicide through pills. It's like the voice in your head telling you to, quote, join me in the afterlife. So dark. And Xavier says it could be a reference to the Matrix. She may be trying to say, join me in my reality outside of this Matrix. Yeah, the Matrix sort of ruined pills for people. You just see a red pill in a blue, you're like, yeah, that's the Matrix. So it's like really easy to see that. And Eric Lee says, the face makes me think of a seemingly endless path of depression and drug use. I mean, I think what would help this piece, Julie, is to contextualize it. Put the figure in a place. Because while I like the mystery of the darkness, I do feel like I'm craving something to push me in one direction or another, because people are giving all kinds of themes, but the themes are all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so I want you to show me where you want me to go with this painting and how that might work out. By the way, if you want to work on depth and backgrounds, Julie, I really recommend you watch this video, because I talk about a technique called atmospheric perspective, where it shows you how to get deeper into the space so you're not just relying on those stark black backgrounds to bail you out. Okay, Jordan, how about this piece? It's called Get Ready With Me, and it's an oil on canvas.
So I think that this one is probably one of the more complex of the paintings that we saw. I noticed that a lot of them tend to have like this vast, mysterious space, sort of like the last one we just saw. This one I feel like actually has some sort of context. So Get Ready With Me. I've seen all these, faces, these masks, and this it looks like a human body and head, but the way I'm seeing it right now actually looks like some sort of monster, like opening their mouth. Not sure if that's intentional or not, but I think that this piece is probably one of the most intriguing to me as to what it could possibly be alluding to.
Yeah, and I have to say, Julie, nice job with that perspective, because that's really working brilliantly. And unlike the other one that we just looked at, which did not have a lot of depth, this one is like shooting downwards. Like, don't you feel like that motion, that like pushing downwards is like really powerful? Like, that's such a great compositional element to this painting that I think is really, really effective. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, though, the face mask thing, it's a little cliche for me. I feel like we've seen that a million times. And I want to know, like, who are these people? Is it meant to be a literal mask? I don't know. Like, are they masks, or are they actual cut off heads to you? Like, how do you see those, Jordan?
Well, it looks like there's some blood seeping out on some of them, so they could be real faces. When I first looked at it, I saw them as masks, and I think actually what might even make this even more heart pounding, make my heart pound a little bit more, is if these were different faces, because right now they seem so blank. They all feel like they could even be the same family, or even in some cases the same person, just duplicated heads. And so it would be really interesting to see, both men and women's faces, different ethnicities, different facial features, maybe some with exaggerated makeup, or, a beard, like just something to really switch it all up. And I think that would show maybe the different identities that are being represented here. I don't know. It really depends on the core thesis of what the painting is, but I think that could be really intriguing.
Yeah, that's sort of going along the lines of Tom G's comment. It feels like, which face will I put on today? Yeah, I think the variety in the faces would really help, because I sort of feel like I look at one face and then I've seen them all, and then I turn off and I don't look as carefully as what's happening. And it seems like some people are saying that maybe there's a connection actually between the last painting and this one. C. Chen is saying this looks like the similar one. Randomness of Fandom says it looks like it's about beauty standards for, quote, the ideal person, how it can mess up someone's mind and mental state, that you have to put on a, quote, mask. And Scott says, I see this almost as the middle mask, quote, getting ready, as said in the title. It's coming together as if to match the other ones, maybe a statement on conformity. Yeah, it's really hard to do something about a mask that's metaphorical in an artwork and not have it be really cliche. It's like the mask is sort of like the ultimate, like, oh, I'm hiding from the world. And so I sort of have trouble with the image for that reason, that it is so blatant. And a lot of it's the faces, because I love the form in the middle, the like glowing red thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that part looks really cool, and it, like I said before, it kind of feels like a monster almost. And if that's kind of, if we're talking about like covering up who you actually are or something like that, that could be really unique. Um, and with the depth of this, like the perspective and the darkness and the mystery and the vast abyss below, I think all that combined can make for something really, really unique. And yeah, oh, go ahead. You can read the comment.
Vincent is saying, I think if some faces have some eyes on it, it would be more interesting and give me added composition flow or direction other than its perspective. It seems to me, Jordan, like people are like really sucked in by the masks. And actually, to me, between the masks and the reddish head in the middle, the reddish head is way more interesting. I think the textures are gorgeous. The glow is beautiful. And so I wonder if, Julie, you might think about keeping the faces, but making the faces like really subtle, like make it like a dark room, but the faces are like slightly coming out, because it's like they're just screaming for my attention. I want them to stay, but I want them to like tone down a little bit. Do you think that might work?
Yeah, I just think having a variety of different types of masks would be cool. Like you can have, like there's these gesture masks where they just kind of cut off here and they have like the bells or, you know, something like that, or maybe caricaturized masks. Like I remember watching a show and they had a caricaturized mask of Richard Nixon. They gave him a really big nose and things like that. You could try adding those types of elements just so we can get a variety. Because if it's about, you know, someone mentioned earlier in the comments, what mask will I put on today? I think that that could be a really good way to show it.
Tia is asking, how do you find imagery that's not so blatant? I really struggle with this too. Might be worth doing a stream on, or maybe the upcoming artist brainstorm one may cover it. Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, there's no formula for how to do that. But I think part of it is not having the imagery be so loud. Because to me, the faces are so over the top here that they're commanding too much attention, and I want them to sit back. And so it's not that you have to get rid of the faces, it's just make it so the balance is different. So that way the head at the bottom comes out more and the faces maybe sit back a little bit more. Okay, so we have a ceramics piece now. What do you think about this, Jordan, especially now that we've been seeing a lot of paintings and now we got a ceramics piece?
Yeah, you know, I think this is a really interesting change of pace. And I do like this big stripe of this, I guess it's ink on the piece. The only thing that bothers me is that I can't see the silhouette of the actual piece. The background is too close to the white of the pottery. And I feel like even maybe the pottery could have a more exaggerated silhouette to help convey that sense of motion that the ink itself is conveying.
Yeah, I mean, technically speaking, it's beautifully crafted. And I do feel with ceramics, if you do a bad job, you're in trouble. Like people can really tell when it doesn't look good. It's like bookbinding. It just looks terrible if you don't do a good job. And I think it's exquisite, Julie. I think you did a great job fabricating it. But I would agree with Jordan. The problem is not the piece, it's the photograph. Because one of the things that we talk about a lot here is how to represent your work in a digital photo. And the thing is, the backdrop that you choose for your sculpture makes a huge difference. And so if we look at this, Julie, your photo is like the one on the far right, where you have a white sculpture on a white background. And so you don't really see it very well. And so I would actually choose like a gray background. And then another thing is I would look at how to light it. Because Jordan, if we go back and we look at this, where is the light coming from? Do we really know?
It's very hard to tell. I could probably take a guess that maybe that spot, there's one spot that looks like it has a highlight, but it could just be part of the ink not being there. So yeah, it's very hard to tell right now.
Yeah, so what can happen is if you don't have a very visible light source, it can make a 3D sculpture look really flat. And so that's something in this video that I'm showing you guys, I do go through step by step exactly how to pick the backdrop, how to do the lighting, how to do the angle. And so, Julie, the issue here is not the piece, it's the photo. The photo, I think, does not represent it very well. So just make sure you take time and do that. Okay, we have another piece called Exhausted. It's an oil painting on wood. What do you think, Jordan?
So I like the idea of these faces kind of being blurred or smudged out, and this one in the middle being the focus. The one thing, though, I feel like this is running into something similar that we saw with the very first piece, was that the background is just very nondescript, and I don't get a sense of like what world they're in. And I mean, this could still be a work in progress stage, but I feel like figuring out what the environment is would make the impact so much stronger in this piece.
Well, that leads us to another question. Do you think this is a finished piece, or do you read it as a work in progress? Because that sometimes is not very clear. But the question is, how do we read it? Do we see it as a work in progress, or does it look finished?
I mean, for me, I still kind of see it as a work in progress, just based on the sketch of the top of the head. And, but the thing is, I feel like maybe it's just the way I would think about doing the process, but I probably would have just figured out the background first and, painting these on top, because with all the kind of ethereal effects going on, it kind of looks ghostly in some places. I feel like it would just make it feel more like it's in that void, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm not explaining myself as clearly. But.
Well, I mean, for me, I feel like it's three separate pieces that just happen to be on the same piece of wood. And so there is really a lack of connection between the three portraits. And I feel like somehow there's got to be a segue that brings them all together. Because I agree with you. I don't feel like it's a finished piece at all. I feel like it's starting to get going. But the thing that I'm seeing is you got three separate pieces that all look pretty good on their own, but they don't relate. And so that's what's important about a painting, is that all those pieces really come together.
Yeah, and I really like this comment from Moonsparks. It says, if they're closer to each other, then this will be better. And I agree. I think that would help sell the idea that this is the same person, or that that emotion of being exhausted is all kind of connected. And I think that goes right with what you were saying about it feels like three complete separate pieces.
I like this comment from Will, who's saying the faces on the sides could have been made smaller to show depth. Yeah, that's a good way, I think, to think about how do these faces exist in relation to each other in space? Because right now they're just all in the same plane. And so changing that scale could certainly be a way to do that. Or even if you wanted to add more faces, like what if there are faces in between the ones that are already there now, and maybe those are the bridge that happens in between the faces. So Jordan, what about the actual painting technique though? Because we talked about the composition, like what about the colors, the lighting? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so this painting I feel like is starting to get a bit muddy. I don't think the lighting is very strong at all. And again, if this is a work in progress, I mean, that can always be changed later. But I always try to look at lighting as a tool to convey emotion or feeling. And right now I'm not getting that sense. And with a title like Exhausted, I feel like that should be one of the most prominent aspects. Like, how can we use light and color to convey this character, this person is feeling exhausted?
Layla is saying, not sure what the concept is. I feel that the face on the right is a little too similar to the face on the left. Maybe it could be somewhat less smudged for more diversity. Yeah, and I think that doesn't help either, Layla, with the composition, because then it just feels like one thing in the middle and then two things on the side that are exactly the same way. So I would think about that. And Jordan, I like what you said about lighting, because lighting is not just about articulating form. It's about mood. Like, depending on the lighting that you have in a portrait, the portrait could be super creepy or could be really nice and welcoming. So what I would recommend, Julie, is we do have this video that talks about, number one, how does lighting and shadow work on a portrait, but also what kind of mood are you trying to establish? And then also just for some portrait structure stuff, cheekbones, mandible, I think I'd definitely take a look at this video as well, and that'll help you keep going. Okay, how about the still life painting, Jordan?
So I actually really like the composition of this one for the most part. It's one of those pieces that even though it's centered, I feel like the blanket and the way it's arranged is split up in such a way where I don't feel like it's stagnant. Now, on the flip side of that, I feel like there's too few things to look at. It's the blanket or the drape and then the glass. And I feel like there could be a lot more put in here so we just have a variety of things to look at.
I mean, I think the best part of this piece is actually the point of view. Like, do you see this here? I'll use this to show you guys. You see this like angle in the middle, like that little bit, the edge of the table, it shows that we're looking up at it. And you don't usually see that very much. Usually for still life, it's very much straight on. So I really appreciate that point of view. But I agree with you. It's a little bit sparse and I am craving something more. And then the other thing I'd work on too is, do you see how the black above the glass is the exact same black as what's below the glass? And it'd be nice, like if maybe below the table, you could pull out a few highlights, like maybe if the cloth is going back there, maybe in the background, there's a slight indication of a window. I just feel like, Julie, right now, it seems like when you don't know what to do with the background, you just color it in black and you're not going to be able to get away with that forever. Like, even if you look at a Caravaggio painting, which does have like stark backgrounds, he does hint at a couple things. So it's not quite so empty. So we have a couple of comments. For example, W315 is saying the opening in the drapery is a good counterpoint to the black at top. And Moonbeam says, I feel it looks regal. There's an emotion to this piece that I don't often see in still lives. Yeah, I definitely think the point of view is part of that. But I also sort of feel like the application of the paint is really monotonous. It's like every part of the cloth is painted the same way. And I think it'd be nice if there are some passages where maybe the drapery, the painting gets looser, gets tighter. I don't know. What do you think about that, Jordan?
Yeah, I feel the same way. And that's part of, I think that might be part of my emotion of like, we need to see a little bit more. I feel like there's something that's making this not as exciting as it could be. And it could be just something so simple as like changing the way the paint is applied to the blanket or the drape, or maybe having a little pattern on it. It doesn't have to be complex. It could just be some stripes. But I think anything that would help convey the, again, the emotion that you're trying to convey. Like when I see this, someone mentioned that it looks regal. Like, why not have a pattern that kind of symbolizes that in a way, or a color that points that out? I think something as small change like that could really help.
And by the way, Julie, I would check out this video. It's a short video. And basically me and Alex Rowe, we get together and we put together a still life. And it's fun because you get to see some of the decisions that we make in terms of placement, because oftentimes a lot of people don't think about that. Like, I really think if you're going to do a still life painting, the second you pick objects, you are making that composition. It starts with the objects, then it moves to the arrangement. And the drawing part is almost like the second half of it. So a lot of people, I find they don't put enough time and effort into really constructing the still life and thinking about that more clearly. Okay, how about this gouache painting, Jordan? It's called Trapped.
This one's interesting in that it's like the exact opposite of what we've been looking at with in terms of the background being mysterious. And now it's just like, it feels like there's emptiness, but it's from the white of the paper. And I feel like all the interest, it does come from the mark making, like that's being achieved for sure. And I feel like there is a sense of mystery, but now I really feel like I can't understand this space anymore. Like there's not even a void to convey an emotion. It's just the white of the page. And that's the only part that really trips me up.
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with using the white of the page. It's just you have to transform the white of the page. And what I mean by that is if you have a lot of the white of the page and it just feels like, oh, well, that's the leftover white of the page, then it has a real flatness. I have definitely seen drawings where people really have activated the white of the page so that the white of the page almost feels like it's a different color, or it feels like it's got light on it. There's some quality to it. It doesn't look like the literal paper. But in this one, I think it's suffering from that. I do feel like it's leftover white paper that just wasn't addressed. Now, do you see a face, Jordan? Because I didn't before, and now I do.
Yeah, actually, that's funny that you just saw it, because that was the first thing I saw was
Oh, really?
This tilted face that's kind of cut off, probably where like top row of teeth would be. I definitely saw that.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't, because now that I see it, I'm like, what? Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe it needs a broader range of tones, because I do like the dry brushing technique. I love the textures, a lot of like action and movement in the piece, but it does feel flat to me. I feel like maybe if you went in with maybe some gray washes, or like Moon Sparks has a good idea. They're saying if some spots are softer, that would be better. And Scott is saying the border of it is messing with me. Feels like it takes away from a trapped feeling. If it was cropped to the gouache edge, it would feel claustrophobic. Well, that's a minor thing, but that is a presentation aspect to consider. Jordan, do you think it'd be better for Julie to crop those borders?
Definitely. I think that would solve a lot of the problems, because especially towards the top, and that's what I was mostly referring to when I said the white of the paper, it's mostly just up there. If we were just to take off some of those places and the border as well, then you would get the feeling of being trapped and claustrophobic. And it would feel more, I would feel like I would more inside of this world rather than looking at a piece of artwork, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think borders can work. It's just that in Julie's case, because the white of the paper is part of the image, that messes with you in terms of the border. Like if this is like a full out color piece and the white border is like really clearly a border, you could get away with it. But I think in this piece, I would take Scott's advice and crop it. And I would also say for the wash stuff, what I was mentioning earlier, take a look at our new watercolor tutorial, because here we really do talk about getting those more subtle shifts of tone when you're using something that's more washy. Okay, so we have this piece. I can't pronounce the title, but it's a pottery piece and Korean paper. I believe it's called hanji. So Jordan, what about this piece? And by the way, we have two images. We have this image and then we have a detail as well. So what do you think about this?
This piece is really interesting in that it doesn't feel like anything else that's in the portfolio. We've moved away from the human figure and the faces. We moved away from the painting, and this conveys something brand new. The only thing is I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to feel right now. And it maybe it's just my ignorance of, what the title is, or it could be just the materials that are being used, but I'm not 100% sure what I'm supposed to grab from seeing this, even though there are aspects of it that I do like.
I feel like it's an issue of presentation. I get the feeling this is a cool piece, but I'll tell you, if you just show me this without any other information, I thought this was like a digital collage. Like I thought that Julie had taken some images and put them together in Photoshop. But then I look at this, and this, if you look up close, is clearly like a 3D object. It's the Korean paper that she talks about. And so then I'm going, well, hang on a second. This is 3D, but this looks like a digital collage. So what is going on in here? I don't really know. And so Julie did send us a statement that explains exactly what happens. And my feeling from the statement, Julie, and you can correct us if you're wrong in one of the comments, is that it's an interactive 3D piece that somehow we have to watch people physically doing something with it. And so it's just really confusing. Like, I don't know what it's supposed to be. What do you think?
Yeah. I almost wish I could see someone physically interacting with it the way that Julie envisioned, because if that's the biggest portion of the piece and we're missing that, then of course there's going to be some sort of miscommunication or misunderstanding of what's being conveyed here. And so I almost wish we could see this and someone putting their finger through the strands and see what the entire bit of pottery looks like, because it's cut off at the half. Maybe there's markings on it that would explain some of these things that I'm just not privy to right now.
Seven Angelic is saying, is it a picture or an installation piece? Yeah, so there's confusion here. Like, people don't really know. And it's hard to get good, accurate representation of an interactive piece because sometimes it's not always obvious what to do. And Justin Lee is saying the grass-like background is confusing. Yeah, like I looked at that grass-like background and I thought it honestly was like a video projection. And then I don't know what I think it is. I'm just really, really confused. Mm-hmm. And W315 is saying, can it be presented as a video? It absolutely could, but I'll tell you guys, it's hard to shoot a good video. Most of the time when I see people putting a video in the portfolio to represent a piece, sometimes it's even more confusing. So it's hard. It's not easy to do. But Julie, I would just say you want to reconsider how you present this, because I'm thinking it's a good piece, but I can't tell exactly what I'm supposed to be looking at. Okay, how about this title of the piece, which is called One of My Masks, and it's gouache on paper. What's your reaction, Jordan?
So this one I like because it's one of the first times we're outside of the one with the 3 portraits. This is the first time we're really seeing a face up close and seeing all the details and the eyes and everything. I like the mark making a lot, and I think there's a lot of emotion, especially conveyed in the eyes. The eyes are really, really powerful and striking for me, and I'm really getting lost in how that's being how it was done.
Yeah, this one to me has the range of grays and washes that I said the earlier piece called Trapped that had the border around it didn't have. So to me, this one has a real substance to it that I think was lacking in some of the other pictures. And also, you know what's my favorite part of this portrait, actually? You see the hook thing that's at the top? Mm-hmm. Like, you can feel the skin, like, sagging. Like, it's gross, like, but that's exactly what I like about it, is I can feel that gravity. Whereas that first painting, the second painting rather, that had like all the masks on it, those masks to me, they felt very plastic. Mm-hmm. And this one, it's like you can feel the flesh. Like, it is really, really visceral. Mm-hmm. Now, what about the background and composition, Jordan?
Composition doesn't bother me so much. It's just like the background does feel it doesn't feel like it's been thought out very well. I think it would be really cool if it's a mask and it's hanging up on the wall, show the texture of the wall. If someone's actually wearing the mask, show their neck and shoulders. And, you know, I just think, again, we need a little bit more context, because right now, the way I'm seeing this is a mask hanging in the air and there's nothing behind it at all. And I don't know if that's conveying this almost this emotion that I'm getting, the mood that I'm getting from this is almost disturbing. It's kind of dark and in a sense, which kind of goes along with the rest of the work. And so, yeah, I just wish something was there.
Scott is saying it looks almost like a preparatory painting for the oil painting earlier due to the subject matter and hook. And Will is saying, I like this one, but I feel like the lines surrounding the face were placed last minute to cover some negative space. And Moonbeam is saying it looks like one of the masks from the other piece, especially because of the hook. Yeah, I mean, clearly there are themes that Julie's working with. So actually, Julie, when you said earlier in your artist statement that you didn't feel like your work is cohesive, I disagree. I actually think your work is pretty cohesive. There does seem to be a lot of things that continue throughout your pieces. But I feel like the main issue I'm seeing is that this piece, Julie, you were really doing an amazing job on the face. Like, it reminds me of those Japanese masks of demons that are like hardcore and freaky. And I love that about this piece. But the fact that you went into this, no background, no context, what I see a lot is people will do a portrait, they'll spend so much time on the face and they'll go, well, what do I do about the background now? I say, you should have done that before you started. So Jordan, why is that important when you start a piece? think about the background with the face. Don't just do the face and tack on the background later. Why is that important?
Whenever you're creating a piece of artwork, especially a portfolio piece for like art school or something like that, you always want to show whatever it is in context. If we don't have a context to understand, sort of like the installation piece we just looked at, there's a bit of a disconnect there because we didn't get a full understanding of what was going on. And when you don't put the background in a piece, or that becomes a last minute thought, the same exact thing happens where we say, whoa, the mask is cool, but where is it? When is it? What's it doing here? And there's all these questions that we have about the work that I don't think you want us to ask in every situation.
Okay, so I would recommend as well, Julie, that you do some drawing, because we're seeing beautiful paintings in this portfolio. But why should Julie do more drawing, Jordan?
Well, from what we've seen in the portfolio, it's mostly painting and sculpture, and drawing is such a huge foundational tool that I think is critical if you're trying to go into art school. And the other thing is, it will always help a painting. There have been so many times where I've seen paintings that maybe the brush strokes looked really solid, but the drawing itself just was, it wasn't that great, and it kind of broke apart the entire piece. So I think it'll only help your foundational skill set, and it'll go back to what we were saying before about having a variety of skills, which is always
another thing about drawing that I like compared to painting. Drawing's fast. So if you want to work out some of your backgrounds or some of your narratives, you can do that in drawing in a way that would take forever in painting. So I'd really encourage you, do some of our draw alongs and get some practice. Okay, so we have this piece. It's called Like Uncle Sam Said, My Body, My Choice, and it's an oil on wood. What's your reaction, Jordan?
So far, it looks unfinished. I don't think that I'm shocking anybody by saying that. I do think what we see with Uncle Sam here is really well done and well executed. And I just wish we could see more of it. I almost feel it's a little unfair to critique it in certain ways because of the unfinished state of it.
Yeah, it's hard to critique because so much of it is missing. And so it is hard to do. What I would say, though, is that, Julie, you're showing some of your true colors here, because we are seeing that you really are painting section by section. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should distribute your work in the painting more evenly so that every part of the painting progresses at the same rate, because you really shouldn't have eyes that are that detailed and refined and finished, and have other parts where there's just no paint. And I think the risk with that is that the painting can end up very fragmented. So it's like you might paint one part like really finished and looks great, and then it's like by the time you get to another section, your painting has changed. Like, Jordan, do you ever have like almost a learning curve in the middle of a long piece? Like, you ever see that?
Oh, definitely. And this is actually one of those things when it comes to digital art that we harp on a lot, is sometimes people will zoom in too much for a long period of time and they'll just work in that little section. By the time you zoom out, it doesn't even matter because it's so small, or it wasn't even an important portion of the painting. And you want us to be able to read it as a whole. You want to be able to understand what areas need work and what areas you can consider finished at an earlier stage.
Yeah, so I might start with that, Julie. But then another thing I would do, I mean, we could talk about the concept forever, but my first thought is, do you really need everything in this painting? Like, is there anything you could get rid of? Because like, I'm looking at this and everybody knows that Uncle Sam poster is so famous. At least people in the US know it. And I just feel like really the compelling part of this image is the mask, because the mask is what makes it different than that original poster. And so I'm wondering, Julie, like, could you crop the top part of the painting and the lower part of the painting so we pay more attention to the mask? Because the mask in the scheme of the composition is pretty small, but really the mask is almost the most important part of the piece. So this is again where it's like, if you could go back and do some thumbnail sketches, prepare your composition in advance, you would catch some of those problems sooner, as opposed to here where you're like totally invested in the painting. And I would, Julie, watch this tutorial on linoleum block printmaking, because I do go over thumbnail sketches, doing editorial illustrations, dealing with sensitive subject matter. I think would be really good. Okay, Jordan, how about this? Drag me down, oil on canvas.
So first off, I think it's nice that we're getting a little break from the mask idea. I think this is one of those standout pieces in that way. And I think that this void actually works because you put in a little bit of atmospheric perspective. Like, I don't know if you guys can see on your ends, but there's a little bit of the forearm that's being lost into this abyss of the background, which I really think is great. And you know, the only issue I really have is just the physical anatomy of the hands. They're getting a little wonky, but I think it's really, really interesting overall.
We have a question from Juliana. Do you accept digital art? Yep. We pretty much critique everything. There hasn't really been anything I've seen so far that we weren't willing to critique. So absolutely. And we'll have information at the end of the stream about how to submit your stuff for a free portfolio critique. Yeah, I feel like, Jordan, the anatomy is killing me right now. I mean, granted, Julie, you got two tough critics, because me and Jordan, we like anatomy a lot. So we're definitely going to harp on you about that. But I don't know that it's because your skills aren't good. I think it's that you had bad references, because the hand on the right, I don't really see the finger segments very clearly articulated. The lighting on the one on the left is better, but on the right, there's almost like no lighting. So what I'm going to recommend, Julie, is that you take a look at this stream, which is how to shoot your own reference photos, because sometimes like you want that pose of that hand, and then you go to Google it and it's like you can't find it. And so you just ask one of your friends to pose for something. You'll get an image that's a lot easier to do. Because yeah, like Scott is saying here, hardcore foreshortening. And Seven Angelic says Slenderman hands. Yeah, it's creepy for sure. This is not a place I want to be hanging out at all. And Moonbeam is saying, I like the left hand is better because it has a better balance of hard and soft edges, especially that index finger. Yeah, it's hard because it's like, because there's only two objects, we can't help but compare them, right? I mean, do you think the one on the left is stronger, Jordan?
Oh, definitely. That's definitely the better of the two halves.
All right, let's take a look at this piece called Dream, Oil and Modeling Paste on Canvas. What do you think?
I think this one's interesting because, first off, it's upside down. And I like how you're combining this realistic face and you're blending it in such a way where it feels like it makes sense with the rest of the environment. Like some of the other pieces, like Exhausted, it felt too disconnected, but the way you're blending the skin here and the eyebrows and have it going out into the distance, and then with the textured top, I think, or the top of the piece, I think those are all really connecting well.
Guys, Julie is live with us in the chat. I'm so excited. I love that. Julie's in class, can't watch, but really cool. I'm hoping you'll be able to watch it later on because there's some great comments about your work, Julie, and I hope you get to absorb that. Julie's saying, I love the critiques here. Thank you so much. Well, hopefully we're not too much of a distraction to your classes, but you'll be able to take a look at that at some point. Now, this is an interesting comment. Moses is saying the background looks like a city. And Ugari says lighting could enhance dimensionality. And let's see, Moonspark says this is very dreamy. I like the idea behind this piece a lot, Jordan. It does feel like a more complete piece, like it was conceived about as a whole composition. Whereas we've seen a lot of pieces where a lot of the artworks feel like fragments that have not been connected. And this one definitely, the transition is very visible. Like we can really see the segue really well. So really good work there. My only thing is I really feel like the composition is just like divided in half. Like I sort of wish that maybe like one of the eyes was textured and the other one was really sharp and realistic looking. It's just like too much cut this way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. The whole bottom third of the piece actually it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot going on. And if you want to keep that and not have to crop it, you could add like some hair or maybe a hand and have that give it the exact same effect you're giving in the face, but just fill it with something that makes it feel like we would miss something in the painting if we were to cut it off. I think that's the key. And you want to make sure every inch of your painting is well considered so that it makes a complete image.
Charisma is saying the background is like a mix of a forest and a city. Malik says the execution on this one is tops. And by the way, I don't think it's just the technique. I think it's that Julie's playing with materials, because this piece has modeling paste on top of it. It's not just straight oil paint. And I think that's a really good thing. Josh is saying, I find when students try to tackle expressing emotion, there's a tendency for them to overly rely on a stylized face. I tend to want to see more about showing the quote, why or how behind the emotion, rather than just the emotion itself. Showing hints of events that lead to the emotion can give specificity that makes the work less cliche. That is really brilliantly said, Josh. Do you want to take over? Because I could use a little vacation here. But great, excellent comments. And Julie's saying, for this piece, I actually did the face with the intention to just draw a portrait, then suddenly changed directions. So I feel this face was actually too disconnected. Well, what you could do, Julie, obviously give it a shot, but you can always do the piece again. Like if you were in the middle of this and you decide, oh crap, I did it, do it again. You know, it's like there's no reason why you can't revisit that in another capacity. So really briefly, I want to show you guys Elaine Spatz-Rabinowitz, who's a brilliant painter. And Julie, if you look at her work is almost like a relief sculpture. I mean, they're flat, but you can see that she gets really into her mixed media, and her pieces have just like this beautiful, like sculptural quality. So look her up, Julie, because I think you'd really enjoy seeing her piece. Okay, acrylic on wood. Jordan, what do you think?
This one is really interesting because it feels so separate from everything else. Before the stream, when we saw Claire and I were talking about the entire work as a whole, and I said this one just stands out. Yeah, and I enjoy it, but I wonder if it's almost too separate. If you're going for a specific theme with the masks and the void and stuff like that, and I don't know if I'm not saying it shouldn't be included, but I feel like there should be something else other than this piece that has this type of style and this type of graphic quality.
Yeah, I mean, I like it because it feels refreshing compared to the other pieces. And I like that you're experimenting, but I think you need to go a little bit deeper with the application of the acrylic on the wood, because it does sort of feel like the painting only had 2 layers. And so, Julie, one thing you can do is just really layered it up, like just cake on that acrylic paint. You really can do that with acrylic. Oil is a little bit more of a pain, but I think I might consider that because it feels a little bit thin to me right now, even though it's a very bold painting in terms of colors. Like Catawampus is saying there's definitely more of an emphasis on color. Oh, for sure, compared to the others. Ambra saying it's interesting, but it feels really flat to me. And Haley says, my knee-jerk reaction is that we're going to die without a mask. Yeah, so clearly there's a lot going on in here. But to me, this one feels almost more like a painting sketch, Julie. Like this is something you would do to get ready to do a bigger piece. Yeah, like Julie's explaining, this piece was done really quick in almost 20 minutes. Did it for a club meeting, didn't love it, but I felt that it was really different. It's worth it for that reason, Julie. And so even though it may not be like a portfolio piece, it's a good piece for you to do just as a little vacation from what you typically do. Check out this tutorial by Lauren Welch, deals with mixed media and acrylic painting. And Julie, I think this video would be good for you to look at the section where Alex paints with a palette knife, because he gets beautiful textures throughout the painting. Julie is on Instagram. So if you guys want to give her a follow and check out her work, you can get her Instagram link in the video description below. And if you guys would like to be considered to get a free portfolio critique here live on YouTube, we do have the submission form. So that is also, I believe, in the video description below. If it's not, I'll add it later. And just so you guys know, if you are applying to art school this year, I recommend you go to artprof.org, click on tutorials, and if you scroll down, you'll see we have an art school portfolios guide, which really has everything you guys need to know. So check that out. It's a really good resource. We have lots of other art school portfolio critiques by different staff artists here at Art Prof. So a lot of stuff for you guys to dig into. Art Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. Jordan and I will be hanging out in the Discord in the post live streams channel in a few minutes. Julie, I really hope you can join us if you are in the Discord. That would be so great for everybody to get to chat with you about your work, and subscribe to our channel and join the Art Prof family. And thank you so much to our top Patreon supporters for keeping us up and running. Thank you to everybody. Such great comments in the stream today. And we have a comment from Julie saying, thank you so much for the amazing critiques. It was a wonderful opportunity. Julie, thank you for sharing your work with us. I mean, I think you've got so much going for you, more things you can improve upon, but really great work. Everybody, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.